Please join me in a moment of quiet sitting meditation. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda, 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 Namanda. If you'd like to, you can join me in chanting the invocation Shishin Dai, followed by the reading of the Golden Chain 2. The Golden Chain 2. I'm a link in the Buddha's golden chain of love that stretches around the world. I must keep my link bright and strong. I will try to be kind and gentle to every living thing and protect all who are weaker than myself. I will try to think pure and beautiful thoughts, to say pure and beautiful words, and to do pure and beautiful deeds, knowing that on what I do now depends not only my happiness or unhappiness, but also that of others. May every link in the Buddha's golden chain of love become bright and strong, and may we all attain perfect peace. Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida Butsu, Namanda, 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 Namanda. if you're able, please join me in chanting Sambutsuge. The Gatha Sambutsuge comes from the larger sutra of immeasurable life. It is the praises voiced by Bodhisattva Dharmakara to the Buddha Lokeshvara Raja. In these praises, Dharmakara expresses his own desire to attain Buddhahood and his heartfelt determination to accomplish his goal for the sake of saving all sentient beings. Namandam, 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 Namandam. Good morning. It's nice to see everyone. Thank you for coming to today's service. We have a lot of people here today. This is great. I'd like to start the next portion of the service, which will be my Dharma message. Ooh. Some technical difficulties. Normally, today we'd celebrate in Jodo Shinshu Ohigam, which is the spring equinox. It's also the last day of the month of March. And so I wanted to celebrate Women's History Month. And so I'd like to give a Dharma message on Kakushinni and Eshinni. So to start off, I'd like to share a passage or quote from one of Eshinni's letters. And Eshinni is the wife of Shinran, our founder, and Kakushinni is his daughter. So let me just share my screen so that you can see what I'd like to share with you. There we go. So the passage I want to share is a bit long, but I think it has a lot of really nice content. So if you please join me in Gassho, I'd like to share the words of Eshinni. Also, I recall a dream I had while we were at a place called Sakai Village at Shimotsuma in Hitachi province. It seems that there was a dedication ceremony for a temple building. The building stood facing east, and it was apparently on the eve of a ceremony. In front of the building, there were lanterns burning bright, and to the west of the lanterns, in front of the building, there were two Buddha images, suspended from the horizontal part of what seemed to be a shrine gate. In one, there was no face to the Buddhist image, but only a core of light, as if it were the radiance of the Buddha's head. Distinct features could not be seen, and the light was the only thing there. In the other, there was a distinct face to the Buddha image. I asked what Buddhist images there were, and the person who answered, I have no recollection of who that person was, said, the one on the right is none other than the Master Honen. He is the Bodhisattva Seishi. When I asked who the other was, he said, that is Bodhisattva Kannon. That is none other than the priest Zenshin or Shinran. Upon hearing this, I was shocked out of my sleep, and I realized that it had been a dream. I've heard that such things are not to be spoken of to other people, for they may not think that such things spoken by this nun, Eshinni, to be true. Therefore, I have remained silent, not telling other people about this. He said, among dreams, there are many types, but this dream must be true. There may be other instances of dreams in which people have seen Master Honen in one place or another as a manifestation of Bodhisattva Seishi. The Bodhisattva Seishi is the ultimate in wisdom, so he appeared simply as light. I did not say anything about my husband being Kannon, but in my mind, I never looked upon him from that time forward in an ordinary way. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namandam, 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 namandam. For today's service, I felt it quite important to express our gratitude to two very important women in our lineages and in Shinran's family. Without the efforts of Eshinni and Kakushinni, our founder's wife and youngest daughter, respectively, we might not be here today because they're responsible for the founding of Honganji. Indeed, Some historians held some of the historicity of Shinran's family as suspect until they found Eshinni's letters in 1921. Eshinni lived from 1182 to 1268 in Japan. For a long time, her life was generally quite mysterious. Scholars even thought that her existence to be legendary up until the discovery of these letters in 1921. The letters were written in the last 15 years of her life to her daughter Kakushinni, who lived in Kyoto with Shinran at the time. These letters provide insight into the everyday tedium and the religiosity that Eshinni Kakushinni and Shinran shared, and are great examples of what was going on in the early exclusive Pure Land movement in Kamakura, Japan. According to a letter from Kakunyo, who's the descendant and an important Jodo Shinshu figure who lived from 1270 to 1351, Eshinni bore 6 children. She lived much of her life in Kyoto as a well-educated and aristocrat. It's very likely that her family extended to provincial rulers in Echigo. Prior to leaving Hiezan, Shinran had a vision while practicing walking Nembutsu meditation that Bodhisattva Kannon, or Avalokiteshvara, appeared to him and promised to take the form of a human and care for him for the rest of his life. Shinran saw Eshinni as this manifestation of Kannon, the Bodhisattva of compassion. They were likely married around that time when Honen, Shinran, and many of Honen's other followers were exiled. Being exiled to Echigo, where Eshinni's family held strong influence and monetary power, would have likely greatly eased the difficulty of exile for Shinran. After living in Echigo for several years, they moved to Kanto and eventually gave birth to Kakushinni. It's generally thought that Eshinni's family ties in Echigo and Kanto provided a lot of support to Eshinni and her family. As we read in the selection from one of her letters, Eshinni began to see Shinran as a manifestation of Kannon as well. And so the two envisioned one another as manifestations of the Bodhisattva of mercy and compassion. From the letters between Eshinni and Kakushinni, we've learned that Eshinni and Shinran shared a deep relationship that included similar religious beliefs and conviction regarding the Nembutsu path and universal salvation directed towards sentient beings from Amida Buddha. Though the last few decades of their lives were apart, with Eshinni overseeing family and administrative business in Echigo, and Shinran working to complete his exegesis of Pure Land teachings in Kyoto, living with Kakushinni, we generally know that they still cared deeply for one another in spite of this distance. Their obligations to family and their faith prevented them from being together physically, but they loved one another very much. Though Eshinni was an aristocrat and generally had a comfortable, long life, the later years where she was administrating her family estates in Echigo held many difficulties, including crop failures, famines, and epidemics. The discovered letters give us a window into this part of Eshinni's life and her dear love for her youngest daughter, Kakushinni, to whom she designated heir of her servants. Many of her letters to Kakushinni reveal that though Eshinni lived a long life, she suffered from chronic illness and held a lot of heavy responsibilities in administering her family's holdings. During this time of difficulty, Eshinni's faith and hope for birth in the Pure Land were a motivating force through tribulations of old age and separation from Shinran and Kakushinni. Kakushinni, who lived from 1224 to 1283, married one of Shinran's followers after the family moved back to Kyoto from Kanto, or Eastern Japan. She and her husband, Hirotsuna, had a son together, but her husband died only 7 years after their son's birth. Upon her husband's death, Kakushinni went to live with Shinran in Kyoto, where her son was able to learn from her father and for several years before he would join a Tendai monastery in Kyoto. During his final years, Kakushinni cared for her father. At the time, it was thought that when a person of deep faith died, miraculous events such as the appearance of beautiful clouds, apparitions of wondrous sounds and lights, and various other inexplicable things would happen. However, Kakushinni was concerned at Shinran's death and wrote to Eshinni in dismay that her father's death had occurred without such events. Her mother responded in this way, quote, "Let me assure you that I read your letter. Above all, concerning the birth of my husband Shinran in the Pure Land, nothing whatsoever needs to be said anew." Eshinni followed this statement by describing Shinran's conversion experience when he was serving as a hall priest in Rokakudo. He was urged by this manifestation of Prince Shotoku to leave Mount Hiei and seek out Master Honen and learn from him to find liberation from samsara. She also describes a miraculous dream that she had where Honen and Shinran appeared as bright lights in the temple, which is the passage that I shared with you today. Eshinni treats these explanations of her deeply personal religious experiences with Shinran to her daughter as incontrovertible evidence that Shinran was indeed born in the Pure Land at the time of his death. And this assuaged Kakushinni's concerns. All of this conversation in the broader context from which I shared the quoted passage at the beginning of my Dharma message today tells us something really interesting, I think, that we can think about today as Pure Land Buddhists. One of the things that I noticed in the conversation between Eshinni and Kakushinni is that we can see the significance of metaphysical or inexplicable religious experiences, such as manifestations of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in everyday life to convey a message to us. Whether or not we believe in and or experience this personally in our own lives, we can't suspend our disbelief and see this impact and see the impact of these events on other people of deep faith. These occurrences must have held profound significance to Eshinni and truly affirmed her faith in Nembutsu and the Pure Land. Personally, I think of occurrences like these in my own life, where I've experienced an affirmation of my own faith due to the appearance of a Buddha or Bodhisattva. There might not have been miraculous lights or hard to believe images, but there have been times when I felt unsure and alone on my own journey, wondering if what I'm doing is correct or why I'm a Buddhist priest. But someone's always come into my life in an inexplicable way to encourage me and to urge me forward. And I wonder how many of us, if we reflect deeply, can think of times like these in our own lives. Perhaps like Kakushinni, we might not recognize them at first because there aren't many bright lights or miraculous signs, but Shinran was there throughout her life guiding her. Maybe we all have folks in our lives who have gifted us, who have guided us, and we just don't recognize it at the time. Another thing that the exchange between Eshinni and Kakushinni after Shinran's death shows us is that our lives rarely ever live up to our expectations. Kakushinni was expecting miraculous occurrences at Shinran's passing, but he just died like a normal person. At the heart of Jodo Shinshu's teachings is the fact that we're all just ordinary people. Too often we expect far too much from ourselves and from others. There may be surprising and miraculous moments in our lives, but in general, life's pretty mundane. We can always rely on Buddha's wisdom and compassion, but when it comes to relying on other people, and especially ourselves, we have to be careful not to set the bar too high. The third thing that I think we can take away from this exchange is the importance of gratitude and our ability to be present in the moment. Kakushinni was so worried about Shinran's birth in the Pure Land that she might have forgotten all of the moments that they shared together as she was caring for him, and all the lessons that Shinran taught her about Nembutsu, the Pure Land, and the Dharma. Eshinni was able to guide her daughter back to that understanding by reminding her of the incredible work that Shinran and his master Honen had done, and the influence that he'd had on their lives. After Shinran's passing, Kakushinni would go on to be very influential in the founding of Honganji, as the site where Shinran's remains were interred. She and many of Shinran's followers would dedicate a hall to his memory, and from that sprang the organization which has helped us to propagate Jodo Shinshu over the coming centuries. I would say that today's Dharma message, was very much one of gratitude. We give thanks to Eshinni and Kakushinni for everything that they have done, because it's very likely that without them, it's hard to know if we would have Honganji or our lineage of Jodo Shinshu Buddhism. I'd like to conclude today's Dharma message with a quote from Shinran in one of Eshinni's letters. Please join me in Gassho. Indeed, how I wish I could be there one more time to see you, and for you to see me while I'm still in this world. I myself am going to the Pure Land of Paradise soon. There, everything can be seen without darkness, so be sure to say the Nembutsu and come to the paradise with me. Indeed, when we go to the paradise and meet again, nothing whatsoever will be in darkness. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namandam, namandam, namandam. Thank you for coming to service. I wanted to share a gatha done by some of my friends before we wrap things up and have social time. So if you don't mind holding on for just a second, I'm going to share the screen once more for a song. There we go. So this is an original song written and recorded by the Cherry Blossoms, my friends Miko, Emily, and Lisa. And the song's called Namo Amida Butsu.
This is so much better. Okay, I can actually look at you. Okay. We look so hard for something that brings us happiness. We tend to look outside ourselves and forget what we have within. We put our hands together to find peace in our days. The present moment is all we have. Don't let it slip away. If we close our eyes, remember all that we have. Our hearts will feel a brighter day. We'll sing Namo Amida, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida, Namo Amida Butsu. Sometimes we get overwhelmed by all the hatred and pain. If we can look past our differences, there's so much we can gain. If we open our eyes to see the beauty inside, our hearts will feel a brighter day. We'll sing Namo Amida, Namo Amida Butsu, Namo Amida, Namo Amida Butsu. Let's join our hands together in gratitude we treasure.
Thank you, Cherry Blossoms. Also, thank you to everyone who came today. Thank you to the Buddhist Temple of Marin for all of your support. I'm going to end the recording now and allow us to hang out and chat if we like.